Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. In this video I'm comparing the Canon EOS R against the all-new Canon EOS R6. If the R6 is worth the upgrade as a filmmaker, you're gonna find out in this video. Coming up. Hi guys, my name is Paul, I'm a German filmmaker and this channel is all about filmmaking, gear reviews, but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribe, I would really appreciate that. So in this video I'm gonna compare the EOS R against the all-new EOS R6. I've used the EOS R as my B camera since it came out, and I've purchased the EOS R6 about some weeks ago, and I've tested the cameras so side by side to check if the EOS R6 is worth the upgrade. Please note that I won't talk about any photography sides here or features, because I'm a filmmaker and I want to give you my honest opinion as a filmmaker if these cameras are a good tool. Please also note that I will talk about overheating issue and all these kinds of stuff in my upcoming review about the EOS R6. In this video I strictly compare them in terms of image quality, autofocus, dynamic range, whatsoever. And will tell you my honest opinion about that. So I'm gonna slide in here the specs of both cameras while I'm talking about the handling and design of both cameras. So basically both cameras are pretty much the same. They feel really great in the hand. However, the EOS R6 is a little bit bigger in the grip, which is preferred for me because I have big hands. And the texture of the surface feels a little bit more rough, so I think the grip is a little bit better on the EOS R6. And in terms of ergonomics, both cameras are great. That's not the point here, but I love that the EOS R6 has more buttons, so I can easily control my exposure, because I have here this dial up here and in the back, and I don't have this annoying touch bar anymore. Because with the EOS R, I always had to do the last step in terms of exposure, whether it was ISO or whatsoever. Either I needed to touch the touch bar, which was not really my favorite type of thing, or I needed to dial it in on the touch screen. So, but on the fly, if you want to do it quick and dirty, I much prefer here to have the actual dials on the EOS R6. The EOS R6 has also this classic dial here on top for changing between photo and video mode. The EOS R has the top LCD screen, which is quite nice, but for me personally, I like to do it that way. For me, it was always annoying to change the mode between photo and video here on the R. I don't want to say that the R is bad in terms of economics, but I think Canon has improved some things here on the R6, and that's well appreciated. So let's talk about video autofocus, and as we all know, Canon is one of the best, if not the best, camera or company in terms of video autofocus. And both cameras are great, and I always loved the video autofocus on the Canon EOS R, and was curious to see if the EOS R6 is better in that matter. Oh, that was a great rhyme. And I've tested both cameras with the RF to EF adapter and the Tamron 24-70. I wanted to test it with a third-party lens to challenge the autofocus a bit more, and I've tested it on 50mm with an aperture of 2.8. And generally speaking, both cameras work great. As long as you're facing the camera to the EOS R has no problems tracking your camera and it does a smooth focus rec. But what's the R6 particularly better is tracking, because when you turn around and the camera loses phase, the EOS R struggles to find focus and it will focus to the background, whereas the EOS R6 Also, yeah, remembers your back head, so to say, and still keeps you in focus. So let's talk about low light performance of these cameras. Both cameras have a full frame sensor, and yeah, I already love the low light performance of the EOS R. I think the EOS R is very usable up to ISO 6400. You can also go up to 8000, but then you're gonna introduce some noise and you need to do noise reduction. And I was really surprised that I've gained 2 stops more light with the EOS R6, because now I can use it up to ISO 25600, which is crazy. So I have basically the same noise performance as on the EOS R with 6400, slightly better, even more. So I think, yeah, the EOS R6 is great. And yeah, in terms of the Canon ecosystem, I think the Canon EOS R6 might be the best low-light camera from this date. So next point is dynamic range, and both cameras only record in C-Log internally, and as you might know that Canon Log 2 is the most flattest picture profile from Canon, giving you the highest dynamic range. Then below that comes Canon Log 3, and then comes Canon Log, so C-Log, which both of these cameras have. So they have the least dynamic range in terms of these 3 picture profiles, so they are kind of limited when it comes to that. But in my comparison that I did, I saw a slight edge on the R6 in terms of highlights and shadows. So I think that's part of the new sensor, I think. And that's also a welcome addition, because Canon said that they will add Canon Log 3 to the EOS R6 and also to the R5. So that's really much appreciated, and I think with Canon Log 3 we all have the dynamic range that we need, and it's very useful to match to higher end cinema cameras with their dynamic range. Let's talk about menu, and I think they are pretty much identical from my perspective. Canon just added a few more things here and there on the R6 because of more features and all that stuff in terms of image stabilization. And also the buttons or the display on the back screen is a little bit more, has a little more colors, and you can activate start shooting while tapping on a touchscreen. So small minor improvements, but I think in general, if you're familiar with the Canon ecosystem, you're right at home, because there hasn't changed that much. But since I'm already talking about stabilization, I've also tested stabilization modes on these cameras. The EOS R doesn't feature a stabilized sensor, but it has a digital IS, and the EOS R6 has 5 stops of sensor stabilization and also features digital IS. So I tested both modes here, and I really like the stabilization on the EOS R6. So having the stabilized sensor really helps when you're shooting handheld. However, I always really liked what Canon did with the digital IS, because it was looking quite smooth. But yeah, also in this case, the EOS R6 is an upgrade here, I would say. So let's talk about codec and post-production workflow. And yeah, on one hand, the EOS R6 is also an upgrade here, but on the other hand, it's a downside compared to the EOS R. So let's talk about the codecs, because the Canon EOS R6 has an H.265 container, which is more compressed, but it features 10-bit 422, which is really great when working with log files. The EOS R, on the other hand, has only an 8-bit codec, but it's H.264, and you have all-I compression, which is not too compressed like IPB, which only the EOS R6 features. IPB is much more compressed than all-I, and also the container H.265 is much more compressed than H.264. So what I want to say is, in terms of post-production workflow, it's gonna be quite challenging with the codecs of the EOS R6. By the way, if you film in a standard picture profile, you still get 8-bit internally, but when shooting in C-Log, the camera already turns it for you into 10-bit. So that's great. But when shooting in 4K, C-Log 10-bit, your computer will struggle. I added on DaVinci Resolve with a 2019 maxed out iMac, and I needed to get proxies for my computer in Full HD. It worked pretty fine, but when you're working in 4K, it's gonna be hard on your computer, and I think you won't have any of these issues with the Canon EOS R. Your computer will handle these files perfectly, but it's only an 8-bit codec, which is not state of the art anymore, I would say. So therefore 10-bit is really much appreciated here on the Canon EOS R6. So before we come to overall image quality, I want to talk about slow motion. The EOS R does whopping 720p when recording up to 120 frames per second. The EOS R6 can record in 120 frames per second in Full HD, and they both work great. I think sure the R6 is an upgrade here, and also you can use autofocus when shooting in high frame rate mode. In the Canon EOS R that doesn't work, and both don't record sound. So upgrade here on the R6 because of usable autofocus in 120p. So let's talk about overall image quality of both of these cameras, and I've tested them in standard picture profiles as well as in C-Log, as well as different resolutions, so Full HD and also 4K. And right off the bat, the image or you have a huge advantage when shooting in 4K in the Canon EOS R6 because you don't have this notorious crop anymore. The EOS R when shooting in 4K has a 1.8-inch crop, so that's gonna be really pain. And I honestly never shot really in 4K with this camera, only in Full HD. And in the EOS R6 you have a slight crop of 1.03, so it's not even a 1.1x crop, so it's not even noticeable. So yeah, I think you can call it does full frame 4K up to 60 frames per second, so that's what we have all wanted, right? And generally speaking, the image quality of the R6 looks really great, but however I found that the Canon EOS R looks digitally over sharpened compared to the EOS R6, but all settings were set to the same, also sharpness internally and all that kind of stuff. So, and I always use the same lens to get a fair representation. But yeah, the Canon EOS R looks a little bit more sharp, but not in terms of more detail. It looks more sharp in terms of digital sharpness. However, when shooting in C-Log, I always had the issue that the Canon R had lots of noise and digital artifacts in the shadows. So therefore, I never really used C-Log on the Canon EOS R, whereas on the Canon EOS R6 you don't have that problem anymore. You don't have any noise or any artifacts or something like that. So really great addition here. And also the Canon EOS R6 features a 5.5K sensor from the Canon 1DX Mark III and downsampled it internally for you to 4K, so it's much sharper 4K, and you have lots of detail in there, and it's not as over sharpened as on the R. And also in terms of color, you get the same Canon color science. Colors are great on these cameras. However, the EOS R6 is slightly warmer, not as warm what I've seen in the internet. So it was slight difference, I would say, but it's there. And yeah, maybe they're gonna fix it in a firmware update or whatsoever, but it didn't bother me at all, to be very honest. So let's come to the final conclusion, which camera is the right one for you. So if you owning the Canon EOS R already, I think the EOS R6 is a great upgrade because of full frame 4K, you have 10-bit internally, you have better autofocus, exceptional low light performance, and you have basically everything what you want. And it's also kind of great price, because it costs like $2,500, whereas the Canon EOS R is about $800 cheaper. So I think it's worth the upgrade if you're owning the Canon EOS R, and if you don't own both of these cameras and considering to buy these, I would highly suggest to use the Canon EOS R6. However, I think if you tight on budget and all stuff, the Canon EOS R is still a great camera, as long as you avoid filming in C-Log and you can live with the crop in 4K if you want to use that. So if you have any further question that I didn't answer in this video, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, and I'm gonna see you in my very next video.